Welcome to Talking Niagara, everybody. This is it's Peter and David here, and good morning, Mike. So Mike's always here first thing. So thank you, Mike, for being present on
Yes,
the
yes.
first time. So we're talking amalgamation today primarily. Right, we started talking about it. We've had a few discussions all week. Basically, um, well, Doug Ford was in town yesterday, and he was marking a construction milestone at the new Niagara Hospital, and reporters, of course, flooded him questions about his the about Rob Gale's call for a change of regional government structure, and Ford was very much the diplomat, saying he's going to be leaving the possibility of amalgamation to the cities and towns, to local mayors, though he believes something needs to be done. Right? That's the way he put it. And he says you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that we've got too many politicians. I've said even when I downsized the city of Toronto, politicians aren't going to vote themselves out of a job. I think I think they downsized Toronto way too much. They actually need two representatives per riding, but that's my view. Okay, and Ford said there are too many politicians and that amalgamation would save taxpayer money. However, David Siegel, on the other hand, is saying amalgamation doesn't reliably produce cost savings.
Yes. So one of the themes, even our own mayor has said that, Mayor Jim Diodati has said that politicians, now Diodati says, not saying that the politicians aren't working hard. He's just saying that they're not likely going to vote themselves out of a job.
Yeah.
They think of themselves as an important part. So that is one of the themes that they keep coming up. The politicians will not vote themselves out of a job.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. But do we need the politicians? That's the thing that's going on. And we have here, and of course, Ford wants an amalgamation. He wants, basically, it's up to us to decide. That's what he says. But he's putting a little bit of heat there. He wants the region to amalgamate and become more efficient. Now, we have another article here that I submitted, which states that might not likely be the case. Efficiencies are not always brought on by amalgamation.
Well, in fact, actually, what will happen, or maybe won't happen, is theoretically, if you go down from 12 cities to 4, you've got a situation whereby for the workforce at the city, you've got 12 people who currently do the same role at 12 different cities. For example, let's say an administrator who deals with applications for building projects, right? So you've got 12 different administrators that deal with that sort of thing. How many administrators do you actually need if you were going down to a 4-city model? Well, those you'd remove 8 jobs. You go down to 4 remaining jobs. If you went down to one municipality, you'd remove 11 jobs.
No, that's not the case, though. That's the implied idea of reducing the amount of employed people, and you'll be able to reduce the administration from 12 administrators down to 1 administrator, or if you go to amalgamation of 4, you go down to 4 administrators. The fact of the matter is that may not be the case because the size of the cities are larger. Now you will need more staff to take care of them.
Yeah,
that's just now you may save a job here and there, but largely speaking, you're still going to need the same size tree crews to take care of the trees. You're going to still need the same size of plow crews to take care of the snow. So by amalgamating, you don't reduce the amount of snow plows. by amalgamating, you don't reduce the amount of sewer and water that you need.
Yeah,
you don't. You still need
and
the
again,
same
arguably, whilst you will have a central department that manages new developments for the for the 401 cities, again, that could be more efficient, but you wouldn't go down from 12 jobs to one for each of those positions, because you've still got the same number of people going through the door. You've still got to build as many homes as there are requests going through the 12 municipalities as right now, right?
You still need paperwork. You still need inspectors.
Yeah, exactly.
All that you cannot dump a bigger workload on. You can't say one snowplow will now have to do 12 cities. Kind of, you still need the 12 snowplow.
What you might get is some savings on municipal buildings. For example, they might well be able to, let's say, move all the people who are in the Thorold City Hall through to Shimon Parkway, and maybe they can save some money on some city buildings.
Well, they're likely to remain assets of the city or of the region.
Of yeah.
You may be able to amalgamate something. So basically, but on the other hand, as I was listening to Paul, he said he liked to use the term definition of sanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Yeah. But basically, what he is saying, and what Regas has said too on a show, was that we're getting huge tax increases. Obviously, it's not working. It's not the system we have is not working. It's been around for 57 years or whatever it is, 56 years, and it hasn't really improved a lot of things. But again, as a matter of fact, it's becoming quite expensive. So if centralizing the control of part of the region in regional government didn't work, that could be an argument for or against what's going to happen next. It could say, well, look, we haven't amalgamated enough. We haven't done enough efficiencies that the region was supposed to provide. So we got to go more. And other people can say, well, it didn't work. Centralizing some of the control, it costs us a lot of money. So we should go back to smaller municipalities.
Yeah.
Now, just to say, now one of the things they say, we've got 126 politicians here and 124 for all of Ontario. That's a little bit misleading in a way, because the politicians are much a little different. And the article by Siegel says that if you are going to, if you needed a politician, if you need to approach a politician, a lot of politicians in a little area can help, because you can actually approach a politician. You become more personable.
Yeah.
You feel as if you are actually part of something. You can approach a politician easily.
Well, and the sort of thing might well be that your local politician, your local ward politician might actually drink at the same bar as you do.
Possibly, but the real fact of the matter is, drink or don't drink or whatever, you have more access to politicians. The average citizen does. So basically, when you look at this back and forth thing, obviously the price of government is becoming very, very difficult for the citizens of the Niagara region to sustain it. Now the question is, of course, and as Siegel has pointed out, that there is no guarantee of cost savings when there is amalgamation, and he claims that they've seen a lot of amalgamation in different countries, and it really hasn't benefited cost-wise. Yeah. It may have benefited in other ways, but cost-wise, money-wise, it didn't save any money.
I'm a great believer. Having looked at this system, I was telling you yesterday about how Britain works and how our area in Britain would be somewhat like Herefordshire, and was a similar size in population, would basically is all amalgamated into a single unit. All right, so that was an argument for why it should be a single unit. Now, the one issue that I would say about today is that one of the biggest problems I believe we have with municipal funding, and is not going to be solved even with whether we stay as we are, move to a 4-city model, or move to a 1-city model, is that all of our municipalities do not get enough funding. And the part of the problem that we face right now is that there's a lot of federal money that is being misused, and that should be, when we're talking about money that's used for practical purposes, there should be more of the money we pay in federal taxes and provincial taxes should be coming back to the municipalities.
So how does amalgamation or not amalgamation help that?
It doesn't make a damn difference. So
you're saying you should try a different approach.
We need to try a different approach.
So go after provincial and federal governments to bring more money into our area.
If we're going to be honest about it, there is not a single municipality in the entire country of Canada that isn't under a budget crisis right now.
Well, no, I would say that's wrong, because apparently there are 4 cities in Ontario that have hit 0 budget increases. Well, 4 main ones. There would be Windsor, Tecumseh, Vaughan, and I think Sarnia. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, okay, but anyway, so I'm not saying
they have found a way in which
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, they managed to find a way. I agree, but that doesn't mean to say they aren't under incredible pressure. They've found a way through that system, but how many cuts have they made to make that possible?
Well, okay, so your solution is not necessarily amalgamation. Your solution is to petition the federal and provincial government for more money for municipalities.
I think what we're calling about is a fair division of the money.
A fair division of what money?
A fair division of the money, that is paid in taxes that comes back to municipalities.
So what's unfair about it right now?
Well, at the moment we tend to end up with the federal budget tends to end up being spent more on is less apportioned to where people live and more apportioned to federal jobs that are not necessarily meaningful. I think we need to get back to basics within politics, and everything needs to come and a lot more. We need to focus a lot more on how our municipalities work. It is all
well. You're going way off from amalgamation, not amalgamation. None of that is of issue to you at all. You're saying that there is money to be had from the federal and provincial governments that is not parsed out correctly or adequately.
Correct. Yeah.
And you think that's going to be the difference?
I do think that's going to be a difference.
Well, I think none of that is being discussed at this particular time. Yeah. So right now we're talking about amalgamation, or the regions are. None of those politicians are now have that option or brought that up at all.
I know.
So none of them have suggested that at this particular point they may going forward. Right now, what you have is resistance and acceptance at the same time. You've got the big mayors like Diodati and Campion of Welland. They like the idea of amalgamation. The most common idea is amalgamation of 4 different units rather than 1 unit. But the idea is for amalgamation, you have a lot of resistance towards amalgamation. like you have Niagara on the Lake immediately resisted it. St. Catharines City Council did not discuss it at all. They felt they weren't fully prepared to make any kind of discussions up there. So a lot of the councilors in the region have had their hackles up. I haven't heard one yet, and we may find that changing moving forward. We might find that someone says, like you say, well, this isn't the problem. We need more money out of the feds and from the province. But I haven't heard that yet. And so I don't know, maybe that is a viable solution to our tax burdens. But basically what's going on is we're looking and I'll put this, what Siegel has said. He says, is this actually a solution looking for a problem?
Yeah.
Is it really a solution looking for a problem? Thinking amalgamation will fix a problem that we don't really have. He's suggesting that, yeah, municipal governments cost a lot of money, but amalgamation may not be the answer to that one bit, because where are the proofs that amalgamation will save money? Now, what you are saying is amalgamation or not amalgamation, we need more money from the feds and the province, but I don't think that's coming anytime soon. And I don't think the politicians are making any kind of pitch.
Well, in order to make that happen, we need changes at the federal level and changes at the provincial level to make that happen.
Well, that isn't even going to enter into the conversation.
I know
at all. I mean that's okay. That's speculating.
Let's look at a couple of other things that Professor Siegel is talking about. He's talking about wage harmonization will drive up costs, because one of the things you'll find is if you go between all of those jobs, and we're talking about whatever job you're talking about, a gardener is going to be paid different in St. Catharines than they are in Welland, than they are in Niagara Falls, than they are in some of the other, Niagara on the Lake, etc., etc. So where mergers occur, the wage harmonization will tend to drive costs up, because those costs, you can't harmonize the jobs without the costs going up to the highest common denominator. Right? Service level harmonization will increase spending. Smaller municipalities often have lower service levels. An amalgamation will force them to match to higher service levels, and won't necessarily. So we won't have a saving there. Transition costs are large and often long-lasting. So the move across from multiple to a single will always cost. There's always a cost there, right? And bigger governments are not automatically more efficient. This is what Professor Siegel is saying.
Yeah, and basically he says each different. You've got everything. He says you got roads, water, wastewater are handled by both levels, but contractual agreements have rationalized the provision of these services. He says, I noticed that St. Catharines clears the snow on the regional road in front of my home because that's the efficient way to handle it. Economic development remains a difficult problem, but there is an element of competition in economic development not found in other services. So there's all kinds of situation here. Like I said, are we looking for a solution? We're looking for a solution in search of a problem. We do know too. A lot of the rural areas and the smaller communities that are more farm related are going to have a problem with this, because it's in their experience that the biggest taxpayer areas, those are rich in taxpayers, rich in votes, will get the more services. So the more humble, smaller areas will get ignored. If the 13 municipalities say that way, at least the smaller areas can take care of themselves, and sort of take care of their areas quite fine independently. But if it becomes an amalgamation, they'll just get overlooked, like they always have been. So there is a lot of resistance here. I think probably the study of an amalgamation has to, like what Siegel's done here, is it's a cautionary approach. Like yeah, we have a problem and government costs a lot, but amalgamating it sounds good, but is it good? And your amalgamation will have to be, it has to demonstrate the savings that you're going to have. Like everyone thinks, well, the implied solution is to amalgamate, therefore become more efficient, less, less people being employed, less resources required. But is it that much less? One thing you will do is you'll get less politicians, but how much of that budget will really make that much of a difference on less politicians? Let's say you have the politicians from 120 down to 60, or even have them again make it 30. When you look at the amount of money that those politicians get, it's really becomes rather minor expense in the long run.
Well,
you may be able to reduce the amount of politicians, but how much of the municipal works are you actually going to be able to reduce, and how much of them are you going to be able to make more efficient?
Yeah, and basically removing. Let's say that you remove 50% of the politicians from the 126 that they were talking about. Let's say you went from 126 to 60. All right, just to go with that model for an example. Okay, so largely we will remove 60 part-time salaries from our block of elected politicians. But firstly, there's a question there about that means we got less democracy than we ever had before. There's also the question of, does that, so that what would happen, I think, would be those wages would probably be turned around and spent on other things anyway.
Well, let me put it this way. Now that you have politicians responsible for larger areas, their compensation is going to go up. They're going to make more money. Right now, you've got regional councils that make $45,000 a year. I think our own councils make about $25,000 or something a year.
28.
Right? 28,000
last time. Yeah.
Okay. So now, so you have less politicians, but less politicians making much more money. Because if the regional politicians are making $45,000, and then you go to an amalgamation of 4 different cities, each one of those politicians in those areas, even if you have less politicians, will be making much more money.
Yeah.
So how much are you really going to save?
The 28,000 of a Niagara, if you went to the halving the size, halving the model, you might go from 28,000 to 35,000 for the Niagara politicians, what Niagara politicians are paid. But then again, if you went to a one city model, then those politicians are all going to the higher salary anyway.
Well, that's my whole point. If you reduce the amount of politicians, each one of those politicians is going to get
you don't necessarily
get much more money. The compensation has to be.
Yeah.
So if you take our eight politicians here, and let's say we only have 2 politicians out of the 8 as a representative, we're not going to get $28,000 more anyway. They're going to get $60,000 because they're doing supposedly much more work or represent much more people. So the idea of politician compensation is not it. The idea that we have 126 politicians here sounds really bad. But is it more or less efficient? And they really haven't said that so far. They just there is a point where you get too much governance, obviously, and you get too many chiefs and not enough Indians, as they say. You've got too many bosses and not enough workers. That's a possibility. That may be something that's facing Niagara. To reduce the amount of politicians may make things a little bit more efficient. But the question remains, how are you going to make the efficiencies, and how are you going to make them more efficient for that remains to be seen. I think that's the biggest issue here. On paper, it does look bad. We have 126 politicians running a region that's got less than 500,000 people. Then you've got 126 politicians. Is that inherently bad, though? It sounds bad. And Rick, of course, makes the water plants. Well, there's something there. The water plants in the Niagara Falls here have been kicked down the road over and over again. Like have avoided. The politicians have avoided it because it reduces the tax burden on the citizen. So they've not put money into the water and wastewater facilities, and now they're sold. We're going to have to, whether we like it or not. So the tax burden is going to be spiking up for the average Niagaran.
Okay.
No amount of amalgamation is going to help that.
Yeah. Okay. So, and yeah, all of the pay schemes, all of the pay things. So it should illuminate mayor's pay for being part of the region. Did you mean eliminate? Yeah. Gardener a gardener in St. Kitts and a gardener in Smithville, two completely different jobs and should be paid differently. Maybe, but they won't be. They'll be paid. The one in Smithville in a one city model will be brought up to the same as the one in Gardner.
Well, the problem with big cities and big amalgamations is you're going to get gardeners in a desert kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The guy that's doing the gardening, and then the guy that's responsible for the gardens in the desert gets paid the most. Gets paid also. The problem with bigger administrations is a lot of things get lost and inefficiencies happen in big areas as much as they do in small ones. We think by amalgamating that we will inspire efficiencies, but when there's less eyes on government operations, there's more inefficiencies.
Yeah,
because they're too big of a bureaucracy to be easily overseen. That's been a problem with big cities. A lot of waste has gone on, and it just happens, and nobody's seeing it.
Rick is basically
our problem here is, of course, that is where are these savings going to come from? We have mayors like Diodati who instantly say, we have to become, in his experience, efficiencies will result in amalgamation. And he says that no politicians are going to vote themselves out of their job. So you have to do it over and above the politicians because they're not going to vote themselves out of the job. But on the other hand, are other politicians like Diodati trying to get a bigger job for themselves?
Yeah. And by the way, Rick is saying that the pay packet for Niagara councillors will go up from 28 to 34,000 in November.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So
I'm not denying that. That's a possibility. As I said, I knew that it was 28 at one point, and the fact that I don't believe that our councillors can vote for their own pay increase. They can only vote for the next time around. Have a great weekend, Mike. Yep.
Yeah. See you. Have a great weekend, Mike.
Yeah.
I bumped into a guy yesterday that looked like Mike. I was delivering school supplies from one of our as a Quanian. I was delivering school supplies to one of the schools, and a guy walked in, and he could have been Mike's brother, and his name was Mike.
But not a Cushman.
Yeah, I almost said, oh my gosh. And I says, you look like a friend of mine I know is Mike. And he said, my name is Mike.
Okay. All right. So the US is opening up the way for oil to be flowing into Cuba.
Flowing, not flowing.
Flowing.
Okay. Yeah. So all right. Here we have the good guy, bad guy, all being in the same suit. It's almost like a domestic when a guy is beating his wife. When he stops beating her, everybody thinks he's a great guy. Now he's wonderful, right? Because he's not beating them. The problem here all along is, and what I've pointed out, and I think probably just everybody else in the world has, you can choke off Cuba all you want, but what you're going to do is cause humanitarian crisis.
Yeah.
So they've cut off the oil shipments to Cuba. They've even made Mexico stop them, which has caused humanitarian crisis to begin to develop in Cuba. What other countries have done, like Canada, have put in medical and food supplies, $8 million from the Canadian government. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it will, in a population of $10.9 million, will probably make a significant contribution. The United States itself has put in $6 million US, which is about the same as the Canadians if you put it all together. But the problem here, of course, is there is no power for the average citizen. So what the United States has done now is says, okay, we're going to be Mr. Nice Guy now. We took away your means of having power, but now we're going to be nice guys and we're going to give you the means of power. But there are conditions. They can only go to private sector companies, et cetera, which really is a way of saying, yeah, we're not going to deal with the communist government, but we will deal with the private sector companies that are there. It's a bunch of BS, but basically what it's saying is, yeah, we're gonna help relieve the pressure for now, because we cannot be accused of being precipitating a humanitarian crisis. The cruelty of it is, I don't even think the American people would approve of that. Once the news got out about the humanitarian crisis and people not getting operations, people not being able to go to the hospitals or that kind of thing, so people being affected health-wise because of the lack of power. Also, not being able to transport food, if there is food, where it's going to go, and those kind of things. So the United States has got to change its image on this one. It choked off the Cuba and said, okay, we're giving you nothing. And then all of a sudden it says, okay, we're going to give you something. And, but that's basically what we said on this show here, like time and time again, the last few days, like what you're going to do is cause a humanitarian crisis. And that shows you to be a cruel regime. So now I think they've kind of sensed that, and they're going to sort of open the tap a little bit and allow oil and gas in there, ostensibly for private sector and not for the government. I don't know how they're going to do that, but anyway, that's what they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing is that sales to, I don't know why sales to a Cuban government would remain prohibited, because even private sector in Cuba is going to sell to the Cuban government. Let's be honest about it.
Well, the Cuban government's the ones that are running the education system, running the health care system. How do you avoid, including the Cuban healthcare, particularly in the healthcare?
Yeah.
So that's an ambulance owned by the Cuban government. That ambulance is taking that person to the hospital. And how are you going to get gas into that ambulance? Are you going to say, well, we can't put any gas in that ambulance because it's a Cuban government ambulance? See what I mean? We can't put any gas or oil into that electrical generator because that's a government one. So we'll put it over here in a private sector generator. No, I don't think so. That's what I mean by saying it sounds good. That's how they covered themselves here, saying, yeah, we're not going to deal with the government. We are going to deal only with private sector, so we can show the whole world that we are that we will benefit capitalists in the country, capitalism in the country. But in reality, how do they avoid that? How do they avoid helping the Cuban people
Yeah,
without.
You turn the lights on. You're turning the lights on to government departments, schools, hospitals, etc., that are part and parcel of government regimes, right?
Yeah. Another thing too is the bill will then go to private sector, I suppose. We know the Cuban government's got no money at all. We are not assured that private sector companies that are working in Cuba have any money at all either. You know, but if it goes to private sector, it looks as if the private sector will be able to pay them back in time, of that kind. So what they're trying to do is make it appear to the average American that they're bolstering that aspect of the private sector that in Cuba, and then have it as sort of a counterbalance to the government, which is socialist government. I don't know. I think Obama's plan was way better when they started to open up. Cuba and the United States started opening up. That meant that a lot of American agricultural products could be imported into Cuba, and you can start normalizing trade. And after a while, if you begin doing that, then the socialist government in Cuba could not sustain itself over time. It would have to become more of a democracy in order to compete and be incorporated into the family of nations, if you wish. But unfortunately, Trump shut the door on that again. He's very jealous of Obama and Obama's successes, so he shut the door on the Cuba thing, which put more pressure and I don't know, hardness on the people of Cuba when things were starting to look pretty good. Their lives were more connected with the rest of the West. They got harsh treatment.
Yeah,
I don't think that was the way to go.
And the treatment that Cuba, the treatment of Cuba changed under Obama, and it's distinctly changed back, even worse under Trump. And there's very little evidence that whilst it was nominally a communist government, I think the government has changed. The current government of Cuba versus the Cuba regime under what's his name under Castro is entirely different.
Yeah, we find that I'm not sure. Like what Obama's doing is trying to normalize connections and using the soft way of diplomacy, full well knowing that if you relieve the hardships of the Cuban people, and those hardships are directly connected to trade and commerce with the rest of the democratic world in and around surrounding Cuba, that the communist regime could not really sustain himself too long.
Exactly.
Then it would have to work its way into becoming a democracy.
Did you look at the case of these black ships going around? When I say black, I don't mean literally black colored, but they're basically
ghost ships. You're talking about the ghost ships?
Yeah, ghost ships, the ones that are operating in the black. They are operating on the black market. There's a black market for oil, and basically what's happening is valid ships are transferring oil to these black market ships and moving off into, to supply places that are not legal. It's not legal to supply.
All right, we've heard. Now this is a very, very good point, and of course, it's not talking about Cuba now, but
no.
the ghost ships are talking about that came out of Venezuela, that came out of Russia and Iran. What they are is a fleet of 1,400 tankers. 1,400 tankers that don't have a listing or change their listings all the time. They are in the black market, basically selling oil in the black markets to avoid sanctions. Now, early on in the Ukraine war, the Ukraine-Russian war, it was touted by everybody in the West that Russia cannot maintain this war because of the sanctions on its oil. It will run out of money.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, Russia seemed to be making more money than ever. And that's because Russia, Iran, and Venezuela were involved in these ghost ships. 1,400. And I'll give you a guess. How much oil in this world is moved illegally through ghost ships? Take a shot.
A lot. A heck of a lot. I've done it. What, take a shot in
20%.
percentages?
20% of the world's oil is moved.
I was going to guess higher, actually. I was going to guess about 30%, Dave.
Well, okay, 20%. That was a bit of a shock to me. I didn't think that the world commerce in oil, 1/5 of it could be done under the radar, so to speak. Now, what these ships do is they baffle everybody by pinging their locations in places that they are not. They construct imaginative routes that if you were to follow them, you would have thought they went to the coast of Africa to pick up materials or that or whatever, or to dump off their oil. But what is a matter of fact is they went a whole different way. They quickly changed their names and their harbors that are affiliated with them. The whole thing is a black market in oil. And they make so much money that if the black market then does close up, these huge tankers, so you can imagine how much money's invested in these tankers, will just be abandoned, right? Mm-hmm. There's no point in even trying to sell them. They'll just be abandoned. That's how much money is flowing through these black market things. They use spoofing, which means they make it appear as if they're in a certain place in the world, because all the ships have identification numbers. And having recently done some sailing, I know that because we got a little radar on the sailing ship that tells you all the ships that are close by. And you have to know that in case you're going to get run into them or be run over by them. So these ships just take that right away. They turn that off. And what they do is they ping in the locations where they're not. Yeah.
It's like you and I park together. I offload more oil onto your ship. You take my my ping, and now I go off to the legal port.
Yeah, some transfers of oil have happened out in open seas, but the main thing here is like Venezuela moved a lot of its oil this way. Russia and Iran have done the same thing. These are to avoid sanctions. And that's what the if you want to see results that are positive results in the United States right now, is they're getting a handle on this. This is what has supplied. This may be the thing that stops the Ukraine war in reality, because they're coming coming down on these illegal ships. So these illegal ships they're coming down on them. The oil that would have been 800,000 barrels of oil, I think it was every day or something like that, coming out of Venezuela. Most of it was going to these ghost ships. Not one of these ghost ships has arrived since the Trump administration has taken over Venezuela, but that oil is now going to be sold on the open market, and I hope that Venezuela gets his full share of it. So the whole idea of, now I don't know how the rest of the world is cooperating here, but the U.S. is actually landing their military on these ghost ships and forcing them into U.S. waters and kind of arresting them. We found that a cat and mouse game they were playing with a ship out in the Atlantic. Nobody knew where it was. You're thinking, how can you lose a ship that size? Well, they have methods by which to spoof where they are and where they're going. And but it seems like they're onto that now. So we don't know how spoofing is going to work in the future. But if you've got 1,400 tanker ships moving 20% of the world's oil supplies clandestinely, that's a hard thing to fill up. You now are asking the world. You are now asking world oil companies and transportation companies to make up that 20%.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know how easily that's going to happen, but that was remarkable, I thought, and that's why governments like Iran and Russia continue military operations with lots of money, and the Western governments being baffled, thinking we should have choked them off with the supplies of money they're coming. You know, we found too that at least there's a little bit of a divergence here. We found that when Russia was sanctioned, the people who were making money off of Russia, especially Americans, industrialists or whatever, all they did was move their goods to Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan, sell them there, and then they went from there into Russia and made it look as if they sold equipment to Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. And of course, they could get away with selling it there unsanctioned. But then, of course, the government of Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan just sold it to Russia for a profit. And that money that Russia was buying it with was from sanctioned oil from these ghost ships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, the money moves different to the ships. That's the other thing about this. There's a black market money movement method as well.
I'm sure there is. It's hard to. They're kind of getting to the. What bothers me about this is they must have known this was going on for a very long time already. You cannot hide 1,400 ships moving 20% of the world's oil supply. This has been going on, and my guess is that a lot of people would be making a lot of money off of this, and that's why there hasn't been a whole lot of eyes on it. Now, the political situation is different, and I don't know. The United States is now involved big time in this. You would have thought they would have a handle on this long ago. I think they knew about it all along. It's just a matter of who's making money, and is it politically expeditive to go after them now, or should they left them alone? Or I don't know. It just seems to me that suddenly these ghost ships are appearing, and suddenly we know about them. I don't believe that one bit.
No, I don't believe it either.
Known about it for a very long time.
Well, the other thing,
and I don't know why we haven't heard about it in the regular news. You do find, if you go digging, you can find articles on this, but it's not picked up by the mainstream media at all. And now it suddenly shows up, and it looks like, oh, we didn't know this was going on? Hardly. They've known about it for years.
Yeah, so basically what they're saying is hundreds of aging tankers operate a dark fleet, spoofing locations or giving falsified documents to hide origins, but they're supplying oil to places like India, China, and other places.
Look, any country right now that China has built up a massive reserves of oil, massive strategic reserves of oil. And the reason why it could do that is because it bought it at bargain basement prices. Because this spoofed oil, these ghost ships sell their oil at massive discounts, and they make huge amounts of profit. And the countries that buy it inexpensively, and everybody looks like they're happy.
Yeah,
the spoofers make a massive amount of money, pushing around old, aged tanker ships, really making a lot of money off these old tankers, a lot more money than they were designed to do. They should have been replaced, but you use these old, beat up old tankers to move oil. As long as they're seaworthy, they're going to make you some money.
Yeah, and if it goes down, they don't care.
Yeah, except that it's going to be an environmental nightmare, and somebody's going to notice that part of it. But
Yeah,
the registration of these ships is dubious. They register to sometimes they register to countries that kind of look the other way on registration. Sometimes they don't register at all. They have fake
yeah,
registrations, and they may change their name during their voyage. For instance, they may paint themselves a different color. They may drop men over the side in swing stages to change the name of the ship and the port that it's identified with. They can quickly change the paint color, anything to avoid detection.
yeah. So instead of being the Santa Maria out of Venezuela, now it becomes the the Minsk out of Leningrad.
Well, they do
St.
quick
Petersburg.
changes. Like, for instance, if it's Santa Maria, they might drop the Santa part and then it's the Maria, or they might drop the Maria part and it's the Santa. So they do quick fixes like that. A lot of times they'll just drop a letter. Um, um, One was the crane and it became the rain.
Yeah,
That kind of thing. That's the kind of thing they do.
and they changed the flag. Yes, Rick. They
Yeah.
changed the flag. Yeah,
Yeah, they hoist. Sometimes it's they can get registrations like famously from Liberia, but you
yeah.
can get registrations from landlocked countries. I don't know if you can get
Rwanda.
registrations from Uganda or something. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
you don't have a seaport.
yeah. How can you have it out of Lusaka when it's a land location, or Nairobi or something like that, when they're land locations?
You don't have a massive oil tanker coming down the Nile River, to
Yeah,
Uganda.
yeah,
But anyway, so that's what's happening. That 20% of the world's oil is being moved this way. Now, I haven't heard any environmentalists chirp up on this, but they must sooner or later, because these tankers are very old tankers. I'm not sure how many of them are double hulled. So if they're using old tankers, there's no means by which that they are regulated, because they don't really have a port of call, and they're not answerable to any
yeah,
any authority on how their ship is. If it's safe enough to keep going, are the sailors on it going to be safe enough? If they're safe, these things are all taken care
yeah,
of uh, by authorities at different ports, American or Canadian, whatever. They come in to look to make sure everything's safe. If you got they'll check your fleet. Is this oil ship, this tanker, up to snuff? So as yet, I haven't heard much from the environmental community about this. They would probably spout off and saying, "Look, you got to stop this unsanctioned stuff, because these oil tankers, sooner or later, they're going to just erupt, and there's going to be oil all over the place."
yeah.
And I think it probably
Well,
has happened.
you look at oil spills, like what was it? Exxon Valdez. That was a major oil spill, and you think about it, that was a legal tanker. And what happens if one of these illegal tankers goes down? Okay, traveling at sea with these large tankers is becoming more and more efficient, but it could happen. Right. Moving on.
Well, it has happened.
Um,
You know the one that happened off the coast of France there for a while. A tanker broke up. That was
yeah,
some years back.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but like, it kind of gives you an idea how well these things were built in the first place. If these are all aged tankers, by the way, they're not newer ones. They've kind of gone off the radar, because in the legal oil trade, they have been long since replaced by
yeah,
newer, more efficient models. But these old tankers are still out there doing their job. They're pushing the engines are still good. The propellers are still good. They're still being able to get serviced, and they're still being able to be filled with oil, and that then delivering that oil. So
yeah,
it gives you an idea how well these things were built in the very first place. And they were probably replaced, not so much because people thought they were going to break up and sink, but more that they could get more efficient tankers with better capacity, with more efficient engines, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay, quick one, and I wasn't going to say any more than just give the headline. Federal judge has ruled that that ICE can't really expel people without due process.
Well, that's the big complaint all along by American officials. You'll see that parroted by a number of them, complaining that if they go through that process, it would take forever to get rid of the people, right? What they did was that when they went after Trinidad Aragua people, they gathered up a whole bunch of Trinidad Araguans and then took them to a prison in El Salvador. That was completely illegal, even though it appears that most of the people that gathered up were Trinidad Aragua. But to avoid the long process by which somebody gets due process, they just gathered them up and dumped them there. And of course, they took one or two people that didn't belong there and put them in there. And that one fellow, I keep forgetting his name. They had to bring him back because the court said you couldn't do that. So this isn't really that the judge rules that ICE cannot expel people without due process, but that's been the rule ever all along. That's part of the American rules and Constitution. If you are on American soil, you are entitled to due process, whether you're a citizen or not. That's what makes the United States more of a civilized country. That even if you don't belong here, you are entitled to fair legal process.
Yeah. And okay, so basically the U.S. District Judge has written what's likely to be his final ruling on the merits of this particular case, but it could go to the Supreme Court, of course.
Yeah, that's it could do, but basically speaking, I think that now this is the problem for any administration, whether it was the Trump administration, the Biden, whoever. This takes time.
Yeah.
Going through due process of law takes time, and what are you going to do with the migrant? Are you going to keep them behind bars? Are you going to let them out? If you've got somebody that's holding down a job and not a criminal, but they happen to be picked up while you're going after, like ostensibly what Holman says is if you go for a criminal and there's other illegals around that just happen to be picked up because they happen to be there, they're also criminals, so we're going to take them out as well. Now, say you're one of those that happen to just be close by, you're an illegal, but you hold down a job, you're not a criminal, and you got a couple of kids and all that. What are you going to do? The government obviously is not entitled to just wrap you up and send you away. It has to give you due process, but that due process is a lengthy thing, and that's why the government's complaining about it.
Okay. Exactly. And the other question, of course, is the non-illegals, the U.S. citizens that are being evicted as well.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah. Well, let's face it. If they have a Puerto Rican, let's say they see a Puerto Rican in the United States, he's going to be speaking Spanish. He might not know English or much English at all. He's speaking Spanish, and he looks Hispanic, and they grab him and they ask him what citizen he is, and in broken English he says he's an American citizen. He's been born an American citizen. They're going to grab him and throw him in the hoosegow because the dummies don't realize that America has protectorates around the world, Puerto Rico being one of them. If you're born in Puerto Rico, you're automatically an American citizen, and you may not speak English your whole life.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, another one to actually very quickly do before we go for the day is Poilievre is targeting Trump and urges Canada to focus on what it can control in a speech he made this week.
Yeah, it's funny. He's kind of parroting Carney. Carney brought up Thucydides in his speech at Davos, an ancient writer. He quoted an ancient writer. In this particular case, Poilievre is doing the same thing. He's
Marcus Aurelius.
Yes, he's quoting Marcus Aurelius, And Marcus Aurelius was a Stoic philosopher as well as being the emperor of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Marcus Aurelius says that once you realize you can control your own self, you can control your own thoughts, but until you realize you cannot control events outside of your control, basically, then you are not going to be happy. You're not going to be able to deal with it. So Marcus Aurelius pretty much says you have to control the things you can control. And that's what Polyev is saying here. This is, we can deal with what we can here. There's going to be things in the United States we're not going to have much power over, like the whims of the president of the United States. No, we're not. But how we respond to that is going to be our power. And so I thought it was, I thought it's elevating the political rhetoric these days. So much of it is being rubbish talk back and forth between politicians, but now they're actually speaking to the Canadian people on a very mature level, like quoting, famous philosophers and historians of ancient times.
This is a much used quote because it's talking about it's been used a lot to justify a lot of things, and about how you can influence your own life, and that that you should look at the things personally when you're dealing with personal development. You should look at what you can influence over and above what you can't influence. And the argument being that it's not worth reading newspapers because you can't influence what's in the national news or international news.
Yeah, pretty much it says that Polyev says Canadians can have power over their mind, but not outside events. And when they realize this, they will find their strength. And cannot control the decisions of foreign presidents, he says. Opening his speech on Economic Club of Canada in Toronto, he says, but we can control the strength of our own country. We can control whether our economy is solid or fragile. And the lesson of this moment is simple. The path to sovereignty begins with focusing relentlessly on what was within our power. And yes, diversifying trade partners and all that. Now, he kind of disputes the idea that in Davos, Carney says, well, okay, we have to go and sort of unite with all the other, as many of the other middle powers as we always have. Polyev disputes the originality of that, because he said that's already what we've done. We have already done that. We've established free trade agreements with a lot of different middle powers throughout the world. So he says that's a bit overstated because we've already done it. And we are doing it, I suppose. And yeah, of course, he's, it goes on like he's supposed to, basically, what we can do. And I think he's talking more about establishing strong relationships with India, other emerging powers, economic powers. Personally, I would suggest anybody start looking at Africa a lot and start establishing ourselves in Africa in a big way.
Yeah. We need to do more with Africa. Absolutely. Yeah.
Africa is going to be an awesome source of market for us, and we're going to have a fabulous trade going forward with them, because Africa has a much younger population than just about anywhere else in the world.
Right.
So they're going to be the engine of consumer.
Yeah.
And they also have immense resources in that continent.
Yeah,
I would say,
Yeah.
Anyway, Polyev has said also another important thing. Polyev has said is Beijing is not a replacement of Washington.
Agreed. It is not.
Right.
And I don't think Carney thought it was. By the deal that he did was very limited and was not supposed to be a deal, done for replacement for Washington.
No, it isn't. Yeah. I think his voice is more meant to the average Canadian who thinks, well, if we don't make a deal with Washington, we make one with China. Those are the two huge economic powers in the world. If we don't trade with one, we could trade with the other. probably have cautions about this, but I don't think 1 minute he thinks that the Liberal government actually thinks that. I think he believes that the Canadian people sometimes think that way.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to call it quits at that point.
Yes, and basically, I'll bring up Gaza again, like I do every day. Don't forget what's going on there. People like Jared Kushner being involved, and other Zionists being involved in the peace deal. I'm not so sure that the other Arab countries that are involved, or other Muslim countries that are involved in this establishment, are too worried about the Palestinians. Like, I have a feeling they're looking for ways of feathering their own nest rather than supporting the Palestinians. I don't know. It's up for the whole world to have a strong look at this. I don't know. It's so murky. It's hard to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, without vetoes and sanctions.
Yeah. In other words, anyway, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.